What's going on, guys? In this series, I'm going to make bread approachable for you. I know that it might be a daunting task to you to think that you're going to be baking your own bread by the end of this, but trust me, you're going to be baking your own bread by the end of this series with just a few simple ingredients and a couple things that you can pick up at the store for probably less than 20 bucks. You're going to be baking your own bread. It's much better for you. It tastes better. Trust me, this is going to be a huge advancement in your kitchen. I don't care if you've got arthritis, if you've got weak hands, if you've got weak arms, if you don't want to knead your bread, if you literally have no hands. I'm telling you, you will be able to make this loaf of bread. Trust me, no hands. I guarantee it. You'll be able to do this because I'm thinking about it in my head right now, and there aren't any steps in this that you would literally need to have hands. So if you think that you can't make bread, trust me, this is the recipe for you. Now, I'm going to be using kitchen scales to make this loaf of bread, but I'm also going to take the weights that I have and we're going to do our best to transfer it over to volume, to cups and teaspoons and things like that, so that if you don't have scales, you can at least come close. But I'm telling you, you should get out and get some kitchen scales, because once you learn how to bake with kitchen scales, you will open a whole new door, a whole new world of baking things that you can do. Trust me, because there's something called baking percentages, and it's based off of the flour weight in a recipe. And if you don't know what the flour weight is, you can't really use those baker percentages. You just kind of have to eyeball it and guess to what you're doing. So trust me, getting baker's scales helps, because if you know how much flour and how much water goes into something exactly to the gram, you're going to come out with a much more consistent product. But anyway, I told you that we're going to make bread, and that's what we're going to do today, guys, all right? So here we go. Let's make some bread. All right, like I said, we're going to try to make this as approachable as we can. So I'm going to turn on the kitchen scale here. Again, I do highly recommend you get a set of kitchen scales if you want it to be the same every time, but you don't have to. Now, this recipe is going to make 2 loaves of bread, 2 good-sized loaves of bread, okay? So we're going to measure out. I'm going to use a little bit of whole wheat flour, but I do not recommend that you do that if you don't know what you're doing yet. Just use bread flour. This is straight up bread flour. It has higher protein than all-purpose flour. That doesn't mean that you can't use all-purpose flour, okay? If you want to use all-purpose flour, by all means, go ahead and use all-purpose flour. It's not going to be exactly the same, but that's okay. It'll still make bread. You'll get the understanding of what we're doing. So I'm just adding a little bit of my own whole wheat flour right here, just to give it a little more fiber, give it a little more flavor. I'm using about 20% to this recipe, and I will definitely have the entire recipe up in the description of this video, assuming that I can do that. This is my first series, so we're learning together here, guys. We're learning together. But okay, so because I'm using 2 different flours here, I do like to mix them together a little bit just to get the process started, just so that we don't have any, pockets of whole wheat flour or anything like that. So we're just mixing this together a little bit. Now we are going to figure out how many cups this is, okay? We're going to do that together right now. So I'm going to get the scale out of the way. We're going to bring this other bowl in here, and we're going to figure out just about how many cups this is. So we got 1, we got 2, we got 3, 4, 5-ish, I'd say roughly 6.5 cups, okay? So 6.5 cups of flour go in. Next, we're going to use this little kitchen scale here. Let me get this out of the way. We have a smaller kitchen scale. This one I trust more with small measurements. So anything under 10 grams, really anything under 20 grams, or like if I'm measuring salt or yeast, I really like to use this one. It's a little more sensitive. So you're just going to turn this on. I'm using 22 grams of salt. And you're just going to keep on going. Now, this is really foolproof if you get the kitchen scales. I mean, there's literally zero room for error with the kitchen scales. I highly recommend the kitchen scales. They're not that much money to get some cheap kitchen scales. You don't need the top of the line. All right, now let's figure out how many teaspoons this is. Let's see, we got 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of salt, 3 teaspoons of salt. I'd say 3.5 teaspoons of salt. Now we know, 3.5 teaspoons of salt. Now some people will say don't let your yeast and your salt touch. Those people are full of shit. You can definitely let your yeast and your salt touch. I've seen experiments where it literally doesn't matter. But hey, you know, if you want to keep believing old wives' tales, that's up to you. It doesn't matter. So I need to get the yeast out of my freezer because that's where I keep it. All right, here we go. And we are going to measure the yeast. I use 3.5 grams per loaf. So here we're going to use 7 grams of yeast. This is just instant yeast. This isn't active dry or anything like that, or fresh yeast. There's all kinds of different yeasts. There we go. That's just over 7 grams, so that will be fine. Put this back in the freezer before it has a chance to condensate. No moisture in the yeast. All right, so let's figure out how many teaspoons the yeast is. 1 teaspoon. 2 teaspoons. I'd say about 2 1/3, 2 1/4 teaspoons, something like that. 2.5 maybe, be a little bit much. Then we're going to mix that into the flour. Again, this is instant yeast that I'm using, so you don't have to make it froth with the water. You know, if you've ever seen those recipes where it says add the yeast to the water and wait 10 minutes for it to froth, instant yeast you don't have to do that with, okay? So it's just a much easier way to do this. All right, so now we got to bring this bowl back because we need to measure the water. Oh, I forgot my liquid. The dry measuring cup will work fine. We'll figure it out. It'll be close enough. So we need roughly 725 grams of water. If you're over by 10 or 20 grams, it's not going to matter. It's not that precise of a measurement here. It's just close, in the ballpark. All right, so 700, slow it down a little bit. There we go, 728, close enough. So now let's figure out how many cups of water this is. All right, count them with me. Here we go. We've got 1. We've got 2. We've got 3. And if I cannot hit my cabinets, we've got about 3.5, I'd say. 3.5 cups of water. So now you know, if all you have are cups and volume measurements and you don't have kitchen scales, now you know exactly how much stuff goes in there with the volume measurements. All right, so now I like to put a glove on, all right? You don't have to put a glove on, but if you want to pick this out of your fingernails and shit, be my guest. Spoon. Everybody has seen all those high-tech gadgets that they have for stirring all this. It looks like a weird wire thing, little circle-y, like professional thing to stir dough. Yeah, that's some BS, okay? Just get in there with a spoon, a high-tech spoon, and just start doing this, all right? Just stir it around just like this. This is all you have to do. Now again, if you didn't have hands, because remember, I said that even if you don't have hands, you can do this. You take one of these gloves, you put it on your nub, and all you do is get in there and do this. That's all you have to do, okay? So even if you don't have hands, you're still making this, all right? Yeah, don't think I was lying. You can literally make this with no hands. This is the hardest part right here, you guys. All you have to do is get in here and mix this up. Oh, I forgot my bench scraper here. Let me grab a dough scraper. All you have to do is mix this up just enough to incorporate all of the ingredients, okay? We're not kneading this right now. This is not kneading. This is mixing. This is mixing the dough so that we can get all of those ingredients that we just put in here incorporated together. That's it. Once we do that, we are going to stop. We are going to let this rest for 10 minutes on the counter. And during that 10 minutes, it's basically like kneading for us. There are two ways you can develop gluten, okay? One is by kneading. The other is by time. So we're going to use time instead of kneading, and we're going to let time do the work for us, okay? So there we go. We've got this mixed. Let me get all this gunk off my glove here, because that's my bread. I want that in the bowl as much as I can. And then I will go as far to rinse this glove off and reuse it, because the only thing I'd used it for was mixing this bread. But for sake of this demonstration, I'm going to take this glove off. All right, then we take this thing, little bench scraper, little bowl scraper here, and we just go around the sides of the bowl, and we get all that good stuff right in there. And then you're just kind of getting under the dough and folding it to the center. Getting under the dough, folding it to the center. Getting under the dough, folding it to the center. Under the dough, fold to the center. Under the dough, fold to the center. Under the dough, fold to the center. And that just kind of brings everything together, all right? It doesn't have to be perfect. Look at that. Is that perfect? No. Is it going to make bread? Yes. Let me rinse my hands real quick here. And now, all we're going to do is cover this like I told you before. Here we go. We got the plastic wrap here. We're going to cover this, and we're going to let this sit on the counter for 10 minutes. And the gluten will develop, and we'll end up with a much better looking ball of dough after that 10 minutes. So there we go. We're going to give it a 10-minute rest now, and I will see you guys in 10 minutes. All right, after 10 minutes, we're back. We let time do the work for us. We don't have to knead this. I'm telling you, this is literally the easiest and most approachable bread recipe that you will ever make in your life. You'll wonder why you haven't made bread this way before. Okay, so now we're going to uncover this. I need to wet my hands. That might take a minute because I have to walk around the tripod here that's in front of my sink. Wetting your hands will make sure that the dough doesn't stick to them as much, okay? I'm not saying that it's not going to stick to them, but it's not going to stick to them as much. So what we're going to do is we're going to go around the dough here with this bench scraper. We're just releasing it from the bowl, okay? Now I'm going to grab it from the center of the dough, and I'm going to lift right in the center, just straight up. And I'm going to let the front fold under. It's going to do that because I'm going to kind of angle my hands a little bit. So we'll just let the front fold under. When it does that, we're literally going to flop it down, okay? And then you're going to lift it from the center again, and you're going to lift kind of the back end of it up so that the back end flops under it. And when it does that, we're going to set it down. Then we're going to turn it 90 degrees, and we're going to grab it from the center, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lift up, slightly angled, so that the front flops down. With gravity, it will. And then we're going to let it down. And then we're going to lift it from the center yet again, do the opposite, let the back flop under, flop it down, and then we're done. We're going to cover it and let it set for 30 minutes. So let's start right here. We lift it up. It's okay if it sticks a little bit. So you see how I have a hole in the center there? I'm going to let the front go like, yeah, just like that. And then you can just flop it right down. Okay, and if it sticks to your fingers, that's fine. It's sticking because I let my hands dry a little bit. So then, yeah, and you can turn this if you want to. If you want to make it easier, you can turn it 180 degrees, and now you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to lift it. You got that little hole in the center there. You're going to let it flop over itself. Now we're turning it 90 degrees so that we do it to the other sides of the dough. All right, we got to lift from the center. You got a little gape right there. You see it? You see that little gape right there? And then we're going to flop it down onto itself. Then we're going to turn it, and we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Let it flop down onto itself. And that's it, my friends. That's all you're going to do. take the dough off your fingers. Again, if you freshly wet your fingers in the sink and your fingers are still wet when you touch the dough and don't explain things for a minute, it will stick to you a lot less. And then just take this bench scraper and just kind of scrape down the sides like we did in the beginning. And then we're going to cover it like it is. I'm going to let this set for half an hour on the counter, and I will see you guys in half an hour, okay? All right, we're back. It's been half an hour, and we're gonna fold this yet again. Now, technically, the last one we did was just kind of shaping it and getting it not to be a shaggy mess. So we're going to do a series of 3 of those folds starting now. This will be the first one. The last one was just kind of to get everything together and get it to become this beautiful dough ball that we have here, all right? So I'm gonna bring the camera in a little bit closer so you can see this from a different angle this time. All right, I learned my lesson last time. I've got a little bowl of water right here next to me. Makes life a lot easier. We're gonna wet this little utensil here, and again, wetting your hands will make sure that you don't stick to the dough as much. Free it up from the bowl a little bit. Wet your hands yet again. All sides, yeah, buddy. Then we're going to get under the dough from the middle, right in the center. You see how that makes a little U right there and the front's folding under? So we're gonna let it do that, and I'm just gonna drop it onto itself. Then I'm going to turn the bowl 180 degrees. So I'm looking at the other side. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lift it from the center. Let me lift it completely out there. So I'm lifting it from the center. I'm letting the front fold down, and I'm throwing it on top of itself. And then I'm turning it just 90 degrees. Boop, 90 degrees, quarter turn. I'm lifting from the center, just lifting up, letting the front fold down, and throwing it down. Turning it 180 degrees completely around, lifting, letting that front fold down just like that, throwing it down. And that's all we have to do. Just kind of tuck it together, pull the dough off of your fingers. Then we're going to wrap it yet again, cover the dough. And what I like to do at this point is I like to find a Sharpie marker. I thought I had one here, I do. And take the Sharpie marker and put a 1, just a little tally mark, just so that I know that I've already done the first fold, because we have 3 of these to do, and it can get a little bit confusing if you're not keeping track somehow. So just mark it. A pen will work. You don't need a Sharpie, but a pen will work. And we're gonna let this rest now for another half hour. All right, it's been another 30 minutes. Now we're going to uncover this. I brought you guys down to a different angle here so that you can see this from all perspectives possible. Wet all of your utensils, including your hands. Go around the dough ball. At this point, you can kind of push down on the dough a little bit. Give it a good deflating. Don't go crazy. Just kind of get the air bubbles out of it a little bit. All right, now we're going to grab it from the center. We're going to lift. I can do this one-handed. The front's going to fold under, let it. Throw it onto itself. Turn it 180 degrees all the way around. Grab it from the center. Lift up. Let that front end come down. Drop it. Turn it so that you're going to the other sides now. You're turning it literally a quarter turn, 90 degrees. Grab it from the center. Lift. Let the front go down as much as it will, with gravity. You don't have to force it. Drop it. Turn it 180 degrees around. Lift from the center. Let the front drop down just like that. Fold it under the loaf. Kind of tuck it back together. Deflate it some more. You'll see some air bubbles. That's fine. Just deflate them. Pop them. And then we're going to recover using the same plastic wrap because we're not wasteful. And we're going to take our marker, Sharpie, whatever you want to call it, put another tally mark on there, and we're going to let this set See, now we know that we've done 2 folds. It's idiot proof because I like that because I'm an idiot. So this is idiot proofed. Now we know we've done 2 folds and we're gonna let this sit for half an hour before doing our 3rd and final fold. All right, here we are, 3rd and final fold. Are you getting the hang of this yet? I told you this was literally the easiest recipe you're ever going to make. This couldn't be easier to make your own bread. So we're getting all of our utensils wet again, our hands and our bench scraper here. Going around the dough, freeing it from the bowl a little bit, keeping those wet hands, pushing the dough down to let some of that gas escape, pop some of those unwanted bubbles. You want air in the dough, but you don't want bubbles. I know you're gonna find the difference, trust me. And then we're going to lift from the center, let the front fold down, and drop the dough. Turn it 180 degrees all the way around. Let the front fold under, drop the dough. Turn it 90 degrees, just a quarter turn. Lift from the center, let the front go under, and drop it. Now at this point, your dough is going to be a lot more structured. So don't force it to do anything. You don't want to tear it. You just want to work it, let gravity do its thing. See, it's dropping like that. Let it fall. Now we're just going to tuck its edges under itself. Wet my hands a little bit more and just get rid of some of those air bubbles as I kind of tuck it under itself. And by tucking it under itself like this, we're going to be left with a beautiful dough ball. Look at that beautiful dough ball. Blah, 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 blah. And now we're going to cover this and we're going to let it set for another half hour until we start shaping it. We're almost done, my friends. You almost have a loaf of bread, or 2 in this case. Don't forget to mark it. 3, idiot proof, just the way we like it. See you in half an hour. All right, we've done the 3 folds. Next, we've got shaping. Now, I know that it sounds intimidating, but shaping is nothing more than some folds and some rolls, and that's literally it. You're just rolling it and you're folding it. That's all shaping is, okay? So demystify it. Get out of that anxiety realm. Okay, so we're gonna learn how to make 2 different styles of loaf. I'm going to make one in this square. I think it's like a 9 or 10 inch pan squared. So it's 9 by 9 or 10 by 10 or something like that. And then we're going to make a more regular loaf style bread. Okay, so I'm going to show you that with just a little bit of different shaping, you can get different loaves of bread depending on what you want, all right? So depending on if you want to make sandwiches or if you want it for some sort of spreads or something like that, or some sort of charcuterie plate, something like that, you might want a different loaf of bread. So depending on how you roll it and how you tuck it is going to depend on what kind of bread you're making, all right? So get ready because I'm going to show you the easiest step. I'm telling you, this bread recipe, super easy. You're going to wonder why you never made your own bread before, all right? So get ready, we're gonna start shaping. All right, real quick, before we actually start shaping, we're just going to lube up these pans just a little bit, just to prevent some sticking. If you have a spray lube, that's fine, you can use that. I prefer not to use those things. I just put a little bit of oil in there and brush it around. Make sure to get all the nooks and crannies of your pan, whatever you're using. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then set that aside. Same with this one. Get in all the nooks and crannies, all the creases, all the folds, all the corners. Brush it up. Yeah, this will help keep the loaf from sticking, obviously. There we go. All right, set those aside. Now, let's start shaping. We don't need that plastic wrap anymore. We're going to cover the top of this with a little bit of flour. Remove any big air bubbles. Scrape around the dough. Out onto the countertop. Then we're going to cut it in half. I'm just going to eyeball this. I've done this once or twice. You can use the kitchen scale if you want to here. That's another great advantage to the kitchen scales. They'll get you a pretty accurate loaf every time. All right, now because I only have two, I'm going to leave them both on my cutting board. First one we're going to shape is for this square pan here. So we're going to take that square pan, set it aside, get the air bubbles out of this as much as we can. Now I just really have to think about, I'm putting this into a square pan. So I'm going to want it kind of squared. So I'm just going to fold this over, get rid of some air bubbles. Take this side, fold that over that fold just a little bit, pinch that together, get rid of any air bubbles. If you have to put some more flour on your board, go for it. Then I'm going to take this side, fold it over, and then this side, and fold it over that. Pinch that together, right at the seam, flip it, give it a little pat down, make sure all the excess air bubbles are out of it. Don't break its structure, just getting rid of the air bubbles here, okay? Then into the pan, just like that. Now we're going to do this for this pan, all right? So we're going to take this loaf, get the air out of it here. All we're going to do here is take this end, bring it in together, just like this, just in together. Take this little triangle piece that you now have, fold it over, and now we're just going to roll. If it gets too long this way, just take the ends and tuck them in a little, and then just roll, roll. When you get toward the end, you kind of want to square it up, make sure that it's even, and roll. And roll. Get rid of air bubbles as you go. And roll. And roll. And that's it. Right there at the end, you can pinch that seam together if you want to. It usually seals itself. If it's a little sticky and a little tacky, by all means, add a little bit more flour where it's sticky and tacky. And then we're going to take our pan and we're going to put our loaf right in there, seam side down. Always put the seam side down. And that's it. Now we're going to let these rise for an hour or so before we bake them. I told you that you guys could make bread. I told you that this was the easiest recipe that you could possibly make to make bread. And I told you that if you didn't have any damn hands that you could make this. Now, I'm pretty sure a couple of those steps would have been a little tricky without hands, but I'm pretty confident that you could do this. So, my bread has been rising now for about 45 minutes. And I'm going to turn the oven on. I'm going to turn it to 380 degrees. I think it's good to have it just above 375. 380 seems to be good for me. If your oven runs a little bit cold, turn it up a little bit, okay? This isn't rocket science. You know your oven better than most people. If your oven runs hot, turn it down a little bit. If your oven runs cold, turn it up a little bit. For me, my oven's pretty good. I'm gonna get it at about 380 degrees with the oven rack just below the center of the oven. I don't think people talk about that enough when they talk about recipes. The oven rack should be in every recipe, I think, personally. Where does the oven rack go? You never know. Does it go up? Does it go down? So this one is just below the middle for me. I have about 5 settings, different levels in my oven. So I'm gonna go one below the center, and that's where I'm gonna bake my loaves for the entire time. So 380 degrees, I'm turning my oven on now, and I'll see you guys in about 15 more minutes. All right, the oven's preheated. We're gonna get the loaves in. We're gonna bake them for 20 minutes. We're gonna spin them 180 degrees, and we're gonna bake them for an additional 20 minutes. So 40 minutes total, rotating them halfway through. All right, here we go. All right, it's been 40 minutes and the loaves are ready to come out of the oven, so let's go ahead and pull them out. Loaf number 1 and loaf number 2. Just look at these beauties. I told you that you could make bread. This is the easiest recipe, I'm telling you. They should come out of the tins easy. If they don't, give them an extra 5 minutes or so to sit in the tins, and they should release from the tin. They might need a little help. Just kind of push on the sides a little bit until they come out easily like that. And boom, there we go. Loaves of bread, fresh out of the oven, ready to eat. Well, you got to let them cool, okay? These are still technically cooking right now, so you need to let them cool for about 10 to 15 minutes. I do recommend that you let them cool completely before slicing into them, which is really about 30 to 40 minutes, but I understand that you want that fresh bread and you want to get at it while it's still warm. So give it at least 10 to 15 minutes, okay? I told you that that was going to be the easiest no-knead bread recipe that you've ever tried in your life. Even if you've never tried to make bread in your life, I guarantee you that you're going to be able to make bread with this recipe, all right? Give it a shot. Go buy a couple of things. You don't have to buy crazy expensive pans to get this done. You can buy those little throwaway pans that they have in the in that section. I don't know, what is that? So the home goods section of the grocery store. Just buy some of those disposable or use twice or whatever they are aluminum pans, and you can practice with those before you buy some real pans. See if it's for you. See if you enjoy it. The benefits of homemade bread are worth it. Trust me, your family's going to like it a lot more. You're going to like it a lot more, especially knowing that you're giving them something real, because let's face it, today's food products aren't exactly food products, all right? I hope you found this useful today. Go out there, make some bread. Let me know how it comes out, all right? Take care, my friends.